Coming back into the space. How important it is for us to drop into the body before we open ourselves up to information, because it's here in the body that we get to know what is authentic and what is alive for us. We have an intelligence of the body that is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than our minds, but we oftentimes lead with the head and we forget that there's so much happening here that may be even more true than the stories that we share in our head. So what an incredible opportunity that we have here to join together towards this, on this journey towards understanding and healing. Right now in the world, we have so many people and so many policies that are discussing what we can and we can't do with our own bodies. And so it's really powerful to come here and to take charge of how we choose to be, how we choose to express ourselves and in our bodies. To be a woman who is connected with her sensuality, to be a woman who is sexually expressed, is a brave and rebellious act against this long-standing patriarchal messages about sensuality, about sexuality. And so to be a woman who owns her sexual expression, who chooses to feel and chooses to infuse her day with pleasure, is not what we've been taught. And so I'm really excited to start this journey with you today. My name is Dr. Kat Meyer, and I am a sex and relationship and trauma therapist. I'm also a yoga instructor and founder of Sex Love Yoga. And it is my mission to help you to change, evolve this relationship that we have around sex and our bodies. And when we have experienced sexual trauma, like we have here, there is so much, and probably what you've personally experienced is that your world changes around this. Our brain and our body creates this internal working model about ourselves, about the world, about other people. And we move forward from that experience, from that trauma, seeing everything through this new lens and operating the best that we can from this lens, from this meaning that we've ascribed from what we've experienced. And so our brains will develop this belief about sex, about our bodies, about other people, that can disrupt our optimal functioning. So you might have discovered after a sexual trauma these thoughts of not feeling safe. You know, these beliefs can fall under safety. You know, maybe I'm not safe, or I can't be trusted, or I can't trust the world. Maybe feelings of self-defectiveness. You know, something's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I am something wrong. Maybe your brain developed thoughts of responsibility. You know, I did something wrong, or I feel guilty, or I should have done something, or maybe even around control, feeling powerless, or we can't stand the feeling. So if this is ruling how we're seeing the world, how can we rewrite that narrative so it becomes something that is true, both mentally and viscerally in the body? And not telling ourselves that this is how it is, but our body doesn't believe that. You know, maybe you have been telling yourself affirmations, but it doesn't quite sink in, or maybe your body still contracts every time you say these affirmations, and that's because something hasn't processed fully here physically for you to be able to adopt that new worldview. So how do we move out of this? How do we move out from here? And we need safety. We need security. We need positive self-image. We need nurturance. We need to feel empowered again, and we need to be able to connect with pleasure, which is easier said than done, right? It's easier to say these things as the direction that we're going, but it's like, how do we actually adopt that? How do we actually embody that? And it's a journey. It's a journey that takes time, and it's a journey that builds off of each other one step at a time. So I believe that this journey starts here with our physical bodies. And it takes looking at the relationship that we have with our bodies and participating in the deepening of this love affair with our bodies through, and I'll organize this a lot more simply, but through attention, allowance, and affection. So if we start with the attention of our bodies, this is the platonic relationship that we have with our bodies. This is the noticing of our bodies, like we just practiced on at the beginning of this conversation. This is tuning inward and noticing the contractions and the expansions of the body, because your body is in constant communication with everything that exists around you. Whether you're conscious of it or not, it is picking up cues in the environment, and it's labeling it as something that's dangerous or something that is pleasurable or something that is desirable or safe. And it's here that we get to know what the body actually needs. Because remember, the story of our head can tell us all kinds of things, but it may not be true and authentic to what it is that we need. And we can fall into the temptation of making our bodies wrong. You know, telling ourselves that of mind over body, pushing ourselves through. But when we constantly do this, when we ignore the voice of the body, then the voice of the body becomes a lot more quiet. And it becomes more difficult to decipher what it is that the body needs. So we need to strengthen this voice, and we cultivate this by spending time with our body, just like a lover. You know, focusing, just like we would a lover, we pay attention to them, we listen to them, we hold space. So here with our bodies, taking that moment to tune in, to scan down our body and notice what we feel here. This is mindfulness of the tensions, of noticing when the shoulders crunch up or when we curl in on our bodies, or the twitching or the fidgeting in our seats. This is giving ourselves a self-date to luxuriate in a bath, to spend time with our makeup or our clothing, or journaling, breathing, just spending time paying attention to our vulvas or our vaginas or our pussy or our flower, or however it is that you refer to her. But this is exploring your internal bodies and the messages that we give her, that she gives us. This is going the pace of our body. This is tuning in and asking our bodies what feels good, what feels like pleasure, what is desirable, and giving her that permission. So the breath that we took here at the beginning of practice is one of the quickest ways to be able to create spaciousness in the body and ground down so that we can actually hear the voice. Because what you may have noticed, and especially after we've experienced trauma, but even just the stress on a daily basis, sometimes it can feel really crowded in our bodies and it can feel really tense, and we can't make sense of all the stories and all the voices that are going on in our heads. So breathing, inviting that breath in, inviting that exhale, and then inhaling that back out, and spending at least 3 to 4 breaths there. You can notice the visceral shift and the spaciousness that you can then ask your body, what's going on here? Because if we try to ask our body when we're already in a space of contraction and tension and busyness, we can't hear anything. It's too loud here. So take in a deep breath here, right now. And as you exhale, notice the spaciousness that's created. And when we have a tension on our body, then we can develop through the skill of allowance. And this is allowing our body to take up the space and the pace that it needs. This is giving permission to your body to be in whatever state that it is. It's not making the body wrong. We need to be able to validate the body, even if it doesn't make sense to us. Even if we're in a situation where it's supposed to be safe, or we're with a partner that's supposed to be safe, but the body is reacting as if it's not safe. If we tell our bodies that it is wrong, if we invalidate our bodies and we try to push through anyway, we try to have sex anyway, we try to have penetration anyway, the body will resist that. And it can feel like an internal betrayal. So instead, even if it doesn't make sense, we allow the body to be correct. Then we can unlock what the body needs to be able to open again. So instead of pushing through the resistance, if we instead say, okay, body, what do you need here to feel safe? Well, the body might say, we need to slow down, or we need a break, or we need some snacks. Then what you might notice is that your body begins to soften and open again. And sometimes it might need even more than that in order to get to that space of opening and softening. Sometimes the body needs a good cry, a good scream, a dance off to your favorite 80s music, or at least for me, that's what it is. Maybe your body needs a break in the middle of the day. It needs a bath time. It needs a walk around the neighborhood. The more that we can give it permission, again, the stronger we develop that voice. Emotions communicate to us what might be going on inside of us. It's a communication system that helps us to identify something that we might need for our comfort or our survival. So given everything that we've experienced in our lives, does it make sense why we might have the emotions that we do in this particular moment? Again, remember, your brain has created an internal working model, so your body is responding to that. There's nothing broken or wrong with you because your body is responding in this specific way. It just needs more before it can open up. So can we allow ourselves to feel, to be, to need, rather than trying to make ourselves be anything else? Move the pace of our body, not making it wrong, but letting it lead the way and giving it the attention again to discover what's there. And when this comes to sex, especially, our desire and arousal of our body works in relationship to contextual factors. So if we think of our desire of our body, our arousal of our body as a vehicle of a car, and it works in a system of brakes and accelerators, some contextual factors will put on the accelerator and bring our body into arousal and turn on, and some contextual factors will put on the brakes. It's really important to allow our bodies the permission to need what it needs in order to turn on, and not push it beyond what's authentic to it. So move slowly if you need to. And I know, so many of us will pressure ourselves to move faster, or to have an orgasm faster, or to be turned on right away when they get home. And this just isn't true for our bodies. Especially as women, our bodies need a lot more. And we're given these messages in movies and media about how sex is supposed to look like, or how our bodies are supposed to move or turn on. And I think it's important to get rid of these messages and get with how sex actually works for you. And the first place to start here is to think about the contextual factors that turn on the brake first, before we get into the accelerators. Because there may be, if you're struggling with turn on, if you're struggling with desire or your body becoming aroused, there may be many different brakes that are happening that you don't even know about. And so let's talk about some of these brakes so that you can look out for these yourself and empower you to be able to turn these off or mitigate these brakes so that your accelerators can actually turn on for you. So the first one is stress, which, living in this world, I don't know anybody who doesn't have stress. So taking a look at the things that you have to expend a lot of energy around. And now everybody's stress levels are different. Stress is our relationship to stressors, or to external factors, or even internal factors. So what does stress look like in your environment? Are there some of these sources that we can mitigate, or that we can ask other people to support us in? The next one is body image. And given all the cultural messages around what our body's supposed to look like, or who's supposed to have sex, or who's supposed to be sexy, we've all been influenced by these messages. And so what is that internal working model that you move from around body image? If you have a negative image around your body, more than likely your body is contracting, it's pulling away, maybe it's even avoiding. And imagine how that's impacting your sexual desire. I don't want anybody to touch me or pleasure me. I don't want to receive pleasure if I don't feel like my body is good enough, pretty enough, worthy of being sexual. Unfounded or even founded messages or mental worries from our culture is another massive break to our sexual desire. And these can be moral messages around feeling like we're broken, or we're damaged goods, or our reputation, we don't want to be a slut. Maybe even messages around the medical model, that we're diseased if we have an STD, or that sex is supposed to be supposed to look a certain way, or that we're supposed to have an orgasm. And here's some news. You can have very pleasurable sex without having an orgasm. So how important it is to rewrite this narrative that sex has to be penetration, that sex has to be fast and thrusting, that sex has to be with specific people or look a specific way, that sex is penetration, that sex has to have an orgasm. Like sex, if we expand the definition of sex to include all of this activity, from kissing to touching to heavy petting to grinding to all of this, then it actually can give us so much more permission for our bodies to operate in the way that is authentic to it and what it likes. Contraception concerns can be another massive break here. Messages from media. You know, if you're inadequate, if you haven't had a threesome, had anal sex, or if you don't like going down on somebody, or if you don't like receiving somebody going down on you, there's nothing inadequate about you. It's all about discovering what is, again, true and authentic to your eroticism. Disconnection, disassociation, distraction, disembodiment, staying in the comfort zone of your own head. This is another massive break, and especially for somebody who's experienced sexual trauma, it's hard for us to stay in our bodies. And so we can use things outside to distract ourselves or to not feel what is alive in our bodies. And how can we be turned on if we're not connected here? So if we're having a difficult time with turn on or orgasm or lubrication, even though lubrication is not a sign that you are turned on, but if we're having these challenges, or we're even just having challenge with staying present to the other person, then sex, we're probably not going to be as motivated to have sex afterward or in the future, because it's not as fun or it's not as pleasurable. So that's where coming into connection, coming into the relationship with our body is really important. Breathing, relaxing into it. Lethargy, stagnancy at the home, lack of inspiration, feeling desired versus feeling used by our partner. If we're feeling used by our partner, we may not want to be turned on. This may actually be acting as a protective mechanism for us. All of these, if we're not feeling accepted by our partner in the way that we are, or maybe our partner's style of sexual approach or timing at sexual initiation is not in alignment with us, is not true for us. Maybe that's a turnoff. Maybe we have insecurity towards the relationship or where we're at here in the relationship. Or pressure to perform. Maybe pressure of time constraints. Or we feel that energy is scarce, like we just don't have the energy for it. Maybe our lifestyles are overworked. Maybe we have a nutrient deficiency or hormone imbalance. And perhaps we even have a challenging relationship around pleasure or the expanding energy of it through our body. Now, all of these breaks, again, can exist as a product of what we've experienced, but they can also be set as protective mechanisms to prevent ourselves from being vulnerable or feeling what may or may not have been processed, especially after we've experienced trauma. Imagine if we're connected to the body and the trauma is still very much alive in the body, it's going to be so incredibly uncomfortable. So the body's going to naturally respond in a way to protect us so that we don't feel it, so that we're not present to it, or we don't relive it. So our job is not to shame or blame ourselves for having these breaks present. It's about validating our body. It's about honoring our body, having compassion for our body, just doing its job. And it's working really hard to do its job to protect us, and listening in to see what it is that our body needs. As somebody who's experienced trauma, it's going to be really important for you to develop the skills of boundaries, to establish both a sense of confidence and a sense of you taking care of yourself. Look, when I set a boundary, this is creating a reference point for me that I know how to take care of myself. especially when these have been broken in the past. You know, we have these negative reference points of times where maybe we created the belief, or our system created this belief, that we weren't able to take care of ourselves, or it's not safe, the world's not safe. And here we're creating these experiences that we are. So along your journey, it's challenging yourself to reconnect with your feeling body and doing non-dangerous things that you have been avoiding, which is protecting. So we don't shame that, we just honor it, since the trauma happened. And we do this in steps. So many of the amazing speakers that we have today, they are also trauma specialists and Tantra practitioners and coaches. And they'll be teaching you about this experience of titration. So taking these in pieces and building upon each other. Again, we don't move faster than the body. We go the pace of the body. And we move through this slowly and with presence. And we notice how our body responds, even if it's like a ball of tears and we're just like ugly face tears, mascara everywhere, you know, hair a mess. And, and we honor that part too. It is part of the process. So titration, taking smaller bits at a time as you build these new reference points for yourself. And as we titrate, we also practice the skill of setting boundaries. And in sex, especially, practicing boundaries through the art of negotiation. It is important not to betray what is true for your body, but it is important to lean into the edge of discomfort in order to grow, because it's at that edge, at that leading edge of what we've known ourselves to be, that we grow, that we gain new experiences. So in negotiation, I encourage my clients to identify what might be an ideal outcome, which is how you would prefer to see something go, or preferable positions, or preferable spaces or activity. And then expressing what your boundary is, which is how much you're able to give and no more. So that is your bottom line. And then identifying what your edge is. And an edge is a point of negotiation. That's where you can lean into something. It might feel uncomfortable, but it's not betraying yourself. You're not crossing the boundary or giving more than what is actually true and okay for you to give. So, ideal, boundary, edge. Practicing what this is for yourself so that you can communicate that to a partner that you engage in. And that builds the internal self-trust, and that helps to build the reference points for trust in the outer world. Because then you get to witness somebody honoring and negotiating with you versus us not ever knowing what it is that we want and staying in the protective mechanism of confusion instead of developing and cultivating this skill of wanting and desire. With that, I also believe it's really important to emphasize that consent, which is the permission to what happens with your body and just you in general. Consent is living. So which means that it can change moment to moment. And you have this right to change your mind at any time. I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of, especially culturally, that if I say yes, then that means yes lasts forever. But our bodies, like we talked about earlier, are in a constant state of contraction and expansion. So one moment we might be open to something, and the next moment we might be closed to something. For whatever reason, it doesn't even have to make sense. But if we can give ourselves permission to go with that and to be able to say, actually, let's slow down, or actually, this is no longer feeling good, or I'm feeling satisfied. This is enough. Or even say, you know what, I want to engage sexually with you, but I'm not feeling fully open to full-on penetration. So maybe we can just make out and we can just enjoy each other there. And then maybe we'll change our mind. We don't have to tell them that, but it's tuning in with yourself, asking yourself this question: does this feel good for me? Does this continue to feel good to me? And did that feel good to me? Because all of this deepens the relationship that you have with yourself by giving yourself permission and helping you to see that you are dynamic. Your mind changes, your body changes every second. And can we practice being in tune with that? And again, be compassionate with your process and your pace. This is a practice. For some of us, it is hard to speak up for ourselves. Perhaps the past experience has made it so that we can't speak up for ourselves, or we're afraid to speak up for ourselves because we don't know what the collateral of that will be. And so perhaps we just start with the noticing. The noticing, the allowing, the permission, and then the final one, affection. Affection towards our body. Sensuality is the pleasure and enjoyment of our body through our senses. Affection is sensuality. Really, affection is the gentle fondness and the liking of your body. So we can do this through action, or we can do this through mindful affirming. So affection is the caressing of your body. This is the mindful putting on lotion on your body after you take a shower or a bath. This is dancing. This is petting your own skin, giving yourself a hug. This is speaking loving words to yourself in the mirror. The importance of spending time with your body with the intention not to change it, but rather to give affection to it, to give fondness and liking to it. Affection is sensuality. And it's important to differentiate sensuality from sexuality, because in this culture, I see these words interchanged so frequently. And it can inhibit us from being sensual with ourselves because we're afraid that it might activate the sexuality that perhaps we're not in a positive relationship with yet. So the difference between sensuality and sexuality: sensuality is the platonic relationship that we have with the body and how we experience the world through our senses, through our 5 senses. So that is taking my cup of coffee and breathing in the aroma before I take a sip. It's luxuriating in the velvetness of the taste on my tongue. Our senses aren't just, or sensuality isn't just taking in the data from our environment, but it's being in the pleasure of the senses. So we take in our environment and we find the enjoyment of it. It's this being in presence and anchoring into the now. And we get to discover all the sweetness that exists in everyday, even just the ordinary. So in order to achieve sensuality, we have to go slower. We have to get out of our busy minds. And we have to become conscious to these pleasantries that are around us. We can't be sensual and be rushing. So that may even be us taking a deep breath, creating the spaciousness so that we shift from the busy brain into the body that feels. And again, that is platonic. Sexuality is the word that we use when we talk about how we understand our bodies and how we understand our relationships and our attractions to other people from a more primal sense. So this is driven from the innate wisdom of us as human beings. And we can become aware of our sexuality through the expansion of energy, like buzz or vibrations from deep within. Oftentimes we can feel this in our genitals. We can feel this deep within our root, deep into our pelvis. This is the arousal. This is the attraction and the desire towards other people or other things. And it is a very palpable sense of the word. So sensuality can exist in sexuality, and that's when we're engaging with this primal energy, but we're connected to the pleasure and the senses. Sexuality can also exist in sensuality. And that's where, when we find the pleasure in the senses, through the senses and everything that we're experiencing, and we get a little turned on by it. So this might be us dancing to our favorite music in the morning, and we're just circling our hips, and all of a sudden we start to get turned on, and we're like, whoo. Now, for some of us who have experienced trauma or experienced negative experiences around sex, that flutter in the body, or that buzz, that sexual buzz in the body, may bring up fear with it too. And if that's the case, just notice your body, breathe into it, be kind, be compassionate to yourself, and then see if you can direct your attention back to something that is pleasurable or enjoyable. But we need to be able to cultivate this platonic relationship with our sensuality first, especially if we want to create safety and enjoyment around our sex. And self-pleasure, the same thing. Self-pleasure does not need to be sexual. I actually believe that it's beneficial to cultivate the platonic relationship with the body and self-pleasure into it without sex, so that we can utilize it anywhere and anytime. So let's practice defining self-pleasure as any act of affection and caressing the body. So gliding your hands over the contours of your body, petting yourself, maybe even just caressing, running your hands through your hair, holding your breasts, again, without any sort of sexual intention or connection, but just holding them and giving them attention, affection, fondness, love. Maybe even placing your hands over your vulva and breathing into her. Singing, making pleasure sounds as you're drinking your latte in the morning. This, again, might turn you on, and you don't have to follow that buzz into a deeper erotic pleasure. You can simply acknowledge it and let it be. I had mentioned, the relation, being affectionate, being sensual, self-pleasure towards your breasts or your vulva. And I would be very curious to know how your body responded when I used those words or when I gave that suggestion. Because for any woman in this culture, we have received messages around our breasts, what they're supposed to look like, how they're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to touch them or don't touch them, what type of clothes we're supposed to wear with bras, whatever. We may even have had experiences growing up, whether while we were developing, that imprinted in the brain of what our relationship is supposed to look like with them. Or maybe they're dangerous, maybe they're unsafe, maybe they're temptations for other people. Maybe they're for the enjoyment of other people. And then how does that develop the relationship that we have towards them? How often do we touch them? How often are we affectionate with them? Is there sensation here? Or maybe we're just completely cut off and numb from them. So one of my favorite practices for affection is simply holding our breasts or massaging them. And that, when you're ready, is a very powerful practice to get into, because you are reestablishing a relationship with your body through this part of your body where everybody's got their own opinion about them. And you get to develop your own opinion, your own relationship here. So when you start that practice, make sure you have a lot of spaciousness. Breathe into your body, connect with your body. Notice what comes up for you emotionally, feelings-wise, sensation-wise. It might hurt, it might be a little sore, especially if you've been disconnected. A lot of fluids can build up here in the lymph system. But this helps to take care of ourselves. It can increase our sensitivity. It can actually help to flush out any toxins that might have built up here. In my podcast, Eat, Play, Sex, episode 76, I talk about breast love and healing after mastectomies and healing our relationship with our breasts, our heart center. This is our heart center, the extension of our heart center. Very important along this path of healing. And same thing with our vulva. And however you choose to refer to her. There are so many names out there of how we're supposed to treat her or talk about her or not talk about her. From messages from when we were younger, how we referred to her or not, up to even the experience that we had around the trauma. Do we spend time with our vulva? Do we connect with her? Do we feel with her? Or have we just completely cut off from our lower extremities? So perhaps we start inviting more of an attention and affection here. Starting with how do we want to call her? What do we want to refer to her? What sort of name can we give her? And on a daily basis, can we connect with her? Breathe down deep into her. Feel her wisdom through the contractions, the expansions, the pulsations. Perhaps even asking her what she desires. Vulva, what do you want today? What feels good? Because there is a very powerful innate wisdom that exists here in our root, in our genitals, where the source of our creation. So as you are beginning this journey through healing, it's my hope that you start here with the body. Learn that the body is not the enemy. There's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing broken with her. She's operating in the best way that she knows how. And when we give her the attention, the allowance, and the affection that she deserves, your body will become your best friend instead of something to fight against. And this will be the foundation for everything that the amazing speakers today have to share with you and expand upon that foundation itself. Remember, it is brave. It is an act of rebellion to be a woman who is connected with her body and her sensual and sexual expression in this world that wants to tell us what to do with our bodies, how it's supposed to act or be. And so know that you will be met with resistance from the outside world, and know that you have women like in here who are also on this path. Pleasure, advocates of pleasure, and for your optimal, authentic expression. Whew, breathe that in. And for all of you who are joining today, I do have a free guided practice that is going to help to activate you and connect you with your body and help you to really discover this inner sex kitten within you. So it connects you with your breath and your sound and your movement to help you to expand into a greater expression. So that link is over here in the sidebar. And